Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Kate and today is day 25 of the 30 days of Stephen Graham Jones. I have done a couple of these already this month. If you are not coming here via the playlist, then I have linked the playlist of all of the other days so far down below so you can check that out. There have been some fantastic videos and we've had a lot of fun discussing various works by Stephen Graham Jones. Today is the last review that I will be doing for this run through, but we still have a couple more days in the month, so there are still more reviews to come. Today I'm going to be talking about The Fast Red Road, which is the debut novel by Stephen Graham Jones. It was published in 2000 by a publishing company called Fiction Collective 2, which I think is a university-related press. And this one is a little bit unusual in that it is much more literary, sort of contemporary fiction than it is horror. There are some small horror elements, but it is definitely more on the literary side. Just know that going in. It follows a young American Indian man, Pigeon, who has basically been summoned home to attend the funeral of his father. This is sort of a second funeral because his father originally committed suicide, I think it was around 10 years ago, and then donated his body to the local, I believe he's a mortician, I don't think it ever says explicitly, who's basically used that body for research, and now has released the body to the family, so Pigeon and his sort of estranged uncle Birdfeather are attending this funeral that's like the final laying into the ground. Pigeon has been working in Utah in the adult film industry, and so he is going back to Clovis, New Mexico to attend this funeral, and he gets into all kinds of stuff on the way there, and then once he actually arrives, he witnesses his father's body being stolen away by an old friend of his father's who he's only vaguely familiar with. So obviously this is super upsetting, and he decides to track down this old friend and ends up getting involved and a lot more aware of some of the things that happened in his father's past that Birdfeather was also involved in and has never spoken about, and also ends up learning a lot about his mother who died when he was very young, but it's all kind of told in this almost mystical fever dream-esque one crazy situation to another, and the point of view alternates from Pigeon to Birdfeather, and then there's one other perspective that comes in that kind of ties beginning to end. So it's definitely an interesting way of handling it. Overall, I think that I am really not the target audience for this one. I can admire the writing and kind of the structure that Stephen Graham Jones put into this, but I'm really not a literary fiction fan. I read primarily for escapism, so I don't like spending a lot of time analyzing or parsing out what someone is doing and kind of the themes involved. And you really need to enjoy that to really get into this book. I think it's doing a lot of interesting things. It's not going to hand them to you. You have to put in the work to really understand all of the allusions that Jones is making. It's definitely a more challenging work. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. As far as what really worked for me, I loved the thematic exploration. Jones really gets into guilt and sort of complicated, difficult family relationships. Pigeon and his uncle do not get along at all, and there's a lot of family history that's kind of between them and that's still causing problems. There's also some pretty incredible scenes that, again, are very fever dream-esque, where you're like, is this actually happening? What is going on? But they're really well written, and those scenes I found myself completely captured by and invested in, even though I kind of struggled with fully getting into the characters. I think, honestly, I probably understood about 10% of what was happening in this story. I could more or less follow some of it, but I think I would have to spend a lot more time and energy analyzing it to really get the full impact of the Fast Red Road. I mentioned this to Fine when she was doing one of her reviews for this whole series, that I think some of his stories are best read in a group or as part of a class where you can really examine some of these themes and what Jones is doing in a literary sense, and less just being a story that you can have fun consuming, right? So that's definitely the category this one is in. I also liked and was disturbed by some of the horror elements that are in here. So if you are uncomfortable with potential violence towards animals, and this is like a common thing you might run into with Stephen Graham Jones. It is present here. It is not as graphic as some of the other ones. Like there's a particular scene in The Only Good Indians that gets pretty rough. This, it's really just mentioned. There's like mention of dogfights, and there's a kind of weird, the Schrodinger-esque part with a dog that you kind of just have to. It doesn't make a lot of sense unless you. I don't know. I don't know what to do with that whole sequence. If you've read it, you'll know what I'm talking about, but I don't want to get into it here. The parts that I really struggled with in this were really the very kind of dense literary style that it's written in, the fact that I had a hard time piecing out exactly what was happening. I think, and I'm going to make I'm bad because I'll make constant comparisons to The Only Good Indians, which is much further along in Jones's kind of collection of writing. But I think that one is more accessible because it's clearer when these dream or possibly like hallucinatory sequences are happening. Whereas in this one, it's kind of all mixed in. So you're rarely sure that what's reality versus what's mythical slash possibly drug induced. So it's challenging, and I think that's part of what made it difficult for me to really consume this, was not really being able to parse that, kind of being confused by a lot of the allusions. There are a ton in here that I think you'd be better off taking it slow and looking these up versus just kind of trying to muddle your way through like I did. But there's a lot of classical references. There's a ton of cultural references as far as both like kind of modern day general American culture as well as specific American Indian culture. It gets into a number of tribes. The Hopi show up, Shoshone. I'm trying to think who else that I remember seeing specifically. But it is primarily in the Four Corners. So you get a lot of the tribes in Navajo. A lot of tribes in that area. Which actually worked really well for me because I'm personally familiar with that area. So it was fun to see references to like Gallup, New Mexico, and some of these other areas. So I think it's well done. It's just not suited to my particular taste. As far as recommendations go, I would definitely recommend this for fans of Stephen Graham Jones who really enjoy digging into literary fiction and analyzing what's happening and are willing to take that time to figure that all of these allusions out. I think they could have a really good time with this. I also think that it would be appealing to people who enjoy thematic exploration because there's a ton of that here. There's even some really fun sequences with Custer. There's some fun sequences with like a giant coyote. Like it's really, really well done as far as like integrating modern expectations of what it means to be American Indian and sort of these stereotypes and how it's treated in film and literature and stuff like that. So I think that was really fun, and it has Jones' standard kind of cheeky humor to it. So I think if you enjoy those kinds of themes, you will definitely enjoy checking this one out. I would caution that I think it's not as well structured as some of his later novels, so I would definitely not recommend this for a first try at Stephen Graham Jones. This is really better for people who love his writing and want to see that more literary side. For me, that's just not really in my wheelhouse and what I enjoy reading, but I appreciate getting to see this sort of thing from Jones, who I've really only read horror from before. So it was definitely a fun expansion of what I'm used to seeing from his work. So I would definitely, like I said, I'd recommend it for very specific readers. I just think it's going to have a very specific appeal, so it's not going to be for everybody. Hopefully that was a not too rambly exploration of The Fast Red Road. If you have read this one, I would definitely be curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know if it sounds like something you might want to pick up in the future. I hope you guys enjoy the future videos. Tomorrow it will be back to Amanda's channel for day 26. Hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you later on. Bye!